You can use the modern square of opposition to not only eliminate the phrase "it is not the case that" or "it's false that" from statements in order to Venn diagram them more easily. You can also use the modern square to test arguments directly for validity, and that's what I want to show you how to do here. So let's say we have an argument like this one. It is false that all white marks on this woman's legs are paint marks, therefore some white marks on this woman's legs are not paint marks. Okay, so we got to think about this argument really carefully and what it's saying. The premise statement is an A statement, and we're being told it's false. And the conclusion statement is the corresponding O statement. In other words, it has the exact same subject and predicate terms. And we know that corresponding A and O statements cannot have the same truth value by the rule of contradiction. So if the premise statement is in fact false, in other words, if it's true that it's false, that all white marks on this woman's legs are paint marks, then it has to be true by the rule of contradiction that some white marks on this woman's legs are not paint marks. Okay? And what that really means is if the premise statement turns out to be true, and the premise statement says it's false that, so if it's true that it's false that all white marks on this woman's leg are paint mark, by the rule of contradiction, the conclusion statement would have to be true, and that tells us the argument is valid. It's impossible for the conclusion statement to be false when the premise statement is true. Okay, true that it's false. I know that's tricky. Now take a look at this argument. It is false that all white marks on this woman's legs are paint marks. Therefore, no white marks on this woman's legs are paint marks. Okay? So our premise statement is an A statement that we're being told is false, and our conclusion statement is an E statement that we're being told is true. Okay? But the relationship between corresponding A and E statements is logically undetermined. That means that when I know the truth value of one, I cannot deduce the truth value of the other. Okay? So if it's false that all white marks on this woman's legs are paint marks, it could be either true or false that none of them are. Okay? That no white marks are. So that the fact that it could be true or it could be false tells me that this argument by the modern square of opposition is invalid. Now take a look at this argument. Some white marks on this woman's legs are paint marks. That's an I statement. Therefore, it is false that no white marks on this woman's legs are paint marks. Yeah, it would have to be false, the corresponding E claim. If the premise statement, this I statement, turns out to be true, or we assume it's true, then the corresponding E statement, in this case the conclusion, would have to be false, and that's exactly what the conclusion says. So again, that proves the argument is valid. Now take a look at this one. Just two more quickly here. It is not the case that no fun guys are guys who use tanning salons. That's an E statement. Therefore, some fun guys are guys who use tanning salons. Okay, that's a corresponding I statement. They have to have opposite truth values. So if the premise statement turns out to be the case, right, that it's true that it is not the case that no fun guys are guys who use tanning salons, then this conclusion would have to be true. And that proves the argument valid. All right, last one. It is not the case that no fun people are guys who use tanning salons. Therefore, some fun guys are guys who use tanning salons. Now, this looks just like the last argument. We have a premise statement that is an E statement, and we're being told it's false. And we have a conclusion that is an I statement that we're being told is true. And it would seem that by the rule of contradiction, the conclusion would have to be false. But remember this, the rule of contradiction applies only to statements that have the exact same subject and predicate terms, down to the letter. The subject term of the premise statement is fun people, and the premise statement, or the subject term of the conclusion statement is fun guys. Those are not the same terms, okay? So if the terms don't match up exactly, we can't use the rule of contradiction, okay? So we don't know whether or not the conclusion follows logically from this premise statement because we don't have anything at our disposal to be able to test the argument.